Welcome back to another edition of Force Friday, where we talk about Star Wars theories, characters, concepts, comparisons, analyzations, collectibles, and more. And today we're going to be talking about case assortments. And this is going to lead to probably at least one spin-off video, if not multiple, because the case assortments really do dictate a lot of the line, both in terms of its success, also in terms of which figures become valuable, which figures become difficult to find, which figures become frustrating, which figures become the current Zuvio, if you will. So let me ask you ever walked into a store looking for that one figure only to see a pile of fins from The Force Awakens? That's all down to case assortments, which basically means which figures come in each case that Hasbro or whatever toy manufacturer is shipping to your retailer of choice. They are the single most important thing for a line's health and ongoing profitability. Hasbro's had a long and winding road when it comes to case assortments, but let's break down exactly what we mean even further. Say a given wave has 6 figures. A case of that wave may contain 8, containing 2 copies of 2 figures and 1 of everyone else. Case assortments are incredibly important. It is these cases, as decided by Hasbro, that dictate what figures will and won't be easy to find. The specific number of each figure per box is usually decided based on previous sales and a specific character's popularity, and sometimes specific marketing campaigns. A big ruckus was made back in 2018 over the Marvel Legends Spider-Man Lizard Build-A-Figure wave, for instance, mainly over the character of Mysterio, a long-demanded character by fans, and a character that completed a set for a lot of people's Sinister Six. And he was extremely difficult to find and still commands high prices on the aftermarket. This was because Hasbro decided to only have one Mysterio per case. The rationale being that the obscure design and his then lack of movie presence would mean he would only appeal to collectors and was less likely to appeal to Joe Schmo strolling through his Walmart. However, Hasbro underestimated the amount of collectors willing to buy Mysterio, and thus the figure became hard to find and expensive. The best way to look at this is go back to where it really started, for Black Series anyway, which is 2015. Up until that year, the Black Series line really only put out about 15 figures a year across 3 or 4 waves. This meant that very few cases included figures from a previous wave. However, all this changed with the release of The Force Awakens in 2015. We've spoken previously about how this year was really when Black Series kicked into high gear and became the foremost Star Wars figure line, with the number of waves and figures increasing dramatically. Both coming up to and after The Force Awakens release, the new characters, particularly Rey and Kylo Ren, were extremely sought after. This has to do both with character popularity, but also to keep in sync with the intended licensing and marketing regarding the film's success. Rey, BB-8, and Kylo Ren were the foremost marketing beacons for the film across merchandising and ticket sales to get people interested in the content. But take even Captain Phasma, who has become legendary for her not really doing much of anything in the films, was incredibly hard to find prior to release. Now, Hasbro plans cases of figures far in advance, often as many as 18 prior to them hitting retail. Therefore, they can only go on previous sales and the information available to them to guess which figures will be more in demand. The first Force Awakens wave had 5 figures: Rey, Finn, Chewbacca, a First Order Stormtrooper, and Kylo Ren, and shipped in cases of 6, with 2 Kylo Rens. This is because Hasbro correctly anticipated the demand for the film's main villain would be high. When the second wave hit, containing 4 figures, Phasma, the enforcer that looks like he should work for Target in the future, Poe Dameron, and the infamous Constable Zuvio shipped, it did so in a case of 6 figures, with Finn and the First Order Stormtrooper being carried forward from the previous wave. In the case of Finn, they were very wrong, as that figure peg-warmed forever. With the Stormtrooper, on the other hand, they were right, at least at the time. Hopefully what we're doing here is giving you an idea of how all this works. Hasbro plans the specific amount of each figure based on which they think will have the highest demand. The initial waves leading up to The Force Awakens made Rey very hard to find. She wasn't carried forward to another wave until 3 months after her initial release. This was probably because in the toy industry, female action figures tend not to sell well. But being the protagonist of a movie that at the time was getting insane amounts of love and hype, people wanted her. This spawned the viral hashtag that's somewhat unmerited of Where's Rey, where collectors were complaining about the amount of Rey merchandise, but not really paying full attention to the amount of Rey merchandise that was being presented, only really expressing frustrations specifically to Hasbro. The message was clear. People are happy to buy a female main character and make sure that that character and that figure are available. So in the first wave of Rogue One figures launched 9 months later, Rey was again repacked alongside provide a new Kylo Ren. But by then, the dust had settled, and Rey was no longer as in demand. This led to her beginning to peg warm, and this set off the great Jyn and Cassian disaster. Almost every wave for the next few months featured carry forwards of Jyn and Cassian. The thing was, those characters simply weren't as in demand as Hasbro thought they would be. And so as more and more waves came in, more and more Jyns and Cassians came in. This is why those figures are so easy to find. They might be some of the most overproduced figures in the entire line. This prediction system for carry forward figures is basically a lottery, one that's based on sales data, but still a lottery. Hasbro has no real concrete way of knowing which characters from a movie that isn't out will be in demand in 18 months. That being said, much of the blame can still be placed at Hasbro's feet. Sometimes they just make bad calls. Take the 40th anniversary Black Series figures for A New Hope back in 2017. Those weren't produced in sufficient enough numbers to meet demand, and the whole wave shot up in price instantly and has never gone back down. Or how they carried forward the young Han Solo through several waves of figures in 2018. The hero of a film, yes, but one that even years before release was always going to be controversial. Thankfully, this system has seen a big overhaul. By late 2018, the Black Series at retail was simply an overload, a mixture of grossly overproduced figures like Jyn, Cassian, and Rey, and undesirable characters like Zuvio had led to a huge buildup in retail inventory. It's the reason figures from those 3 years can be found pretty easily at bargain outlets even today. Hasbro realized this wasn't sustainable, and beginning in 2019, they set out an all-new wave and case system. Instead of anywhere from 3 to 5 figures, waves now featured 5 to 6 brand new figures. Larger waves spread out, so instead of 5 or 6 waves, we get 3 or 4. Carry forwards were severely reduced. They still happen, but are pretty much relegated to maybe 1 figure per wave. Figures that go heavily in demand are offered in solid case packs so they can easily be found online. And this system has paid off. Waves typically clear themselves out over a few months, leaving space for the next. Let's look at the newest Attack of the Clones wave. This contains 5 figures never before offered to retail: Obi-Wan, Anakin, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, and the Maroon Battle Droid. 5 figures, yet it's shipping in cases of 8. 1 of Obi-Wan, Kit Fisto, and a Battle Droid, with 2 of Plo Koon and Anakin. 1 Count Dooku is carried forward from the previous wave. In other words, Hasbro thinks they will sell more Anakins and Plos than Obi-Wans and Kit Fistos. Anakin is an ever-popular character, and while Obi-Wan is too, he has had plenty of figures offered thus far in the line. Why 2 Plos and only 1 Kit? Both are kind of niche characters for the more hardcore fans, but Plo had a stronger supporting role through the Clone Wars, a show that only recently ended and Hasbro knew would be on people's minds. Kit Fisto only ever got 1 spotlight episode, and therefore isn't as likely to be as in demand. We also got to take into account the loss of Toys R Us. Walmart and Target can have a toy section as big as they want. For Hasbro, it's never going to equal the shelf space or overall inventory of a dedicated nationwide toy chain. It's hardly good to have pile-ups of peg-warm figures, but a retailer like Toys R Us could handle it far more than a store like Walmart. Hasbro knows they have to get smarter to keep their line selling, and this new case system is one part of that. Case assortments are the single most important thing when it comes to finding figures. They dictate who peg warms, who sells fine, and who becomes scalped to high heavens. Sometimes Hasbro gets it wrong, sometimes they get it right, but as of now, they seem to be on a pretty good path. The one thing they often end up doing is sometimes putting too much stock in the mainstream and not enough for the collectors. And what I mean by that, if we go back to the Marvel Legends scenario that we opened with, is that every case of X-Men is going to have multiple Deadpools or Wolverine. It's always going to be a staple. It's what sells the line. It's the same thing with Marvel Legends Spider-Man. You always get at least one, usually multiple different variations of Spider-Man. This is to grab and cast a wider net to Joe Public, but Mysterio was the one that doubled and tripled in price value. The world is changing, kids are changing, and media for children is changing. And as a result, 3 or 4 Spider-Mans per wave may not be quite as enticing as they think it once was. Whereas a Mysterio, and dare I say a Calypso, that's just me trying to push for my own agenda, mind you, might be far more in demand and be much more successful than Hasbro would consider. But with things like Pulse and HasLab popping up, it is changing the battlefield, it is changing the landscape, but it's also changing the way exclusives are handled. Dear Target, dear Walmart, dear Walgreens, dear Amazon, dear Hasbro, your time is coming. But we'll talk about that another time. Hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are staying sane. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.